Hello, intermediate students. Today we're going to be talking about error messages that you may encounter when dealing with spreadsheet formula. So let's jump right into it. Here's a spreadsheet that I did to calculate some students' grades, but there were a number of formulas that we used that could have potentially had mistakes in them. For example, let's go up to this one right here that has this formula. What if we had misspelled the word? Instead of spelling some correctly, what if we spelled it S-O-M-E? Would that still work with it misspelled? The answer is no. You get this error message when you make that particular error. Notice the hashtag and the question mark tends to be indicative of many of the mistakes you will make. The name mistake suggests that you misspelled a function, and it's fixed simply by going back and typing it correctly. Another problem that sometimes people have is when they're adding cells together, one of the cells does not have a value, but instead has a label. For example, if you add 13 plus 27, and you add these together, I5 plus I6, you get a good answer. But if one of these did not have a value, instead it had a label, that would give you the value error message, indicating that you were trying to add cells that included a value and a label. So the value error message, like the name error message, is a common one if you're adding labels and values together, not just adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, trying to do math with that. You may remember that I showed you one in the past where we took a number and we divided it by 0. And you may remember in your math class that it is mathematically impossible to divide anything into 0 sets. The computer knows this, so it will give you the divide by 0 error. Similarly, it's impossible to find a square root of any negative number. So if we had a negative number, let's say -1, and you were to try to find the square root of that number, that would also return an error message, in as much as the computer knows that that is something that cannot be done. So here are a number of common error messages that you see if you make a mistake in your formula. Let's show you a couple more things you may encounter. Up here, I have a date format. What if the cell was not wide enough to fit the date format? You can see that text spills into neighboring cells, but numerical value entries do not. So if you ever see these hashtags, that means your column is not wide enough. You can make the column a little bit wider, and it will fit a little more appropriately. A couple more that you may encounter. Let's say I decided that test 4 was not what I wanted, so I wanted to delete this whole test. Let's go back to delete our cells. And that surprisingly, that did work. Quite often, if you delete something that's being added, it will give you a bad cell reference, but it actually just adjusted our formula. Let's see if I can show you what this looks like. So if I'm adding some cells, let's scroll down a little bit. So we have a few numbers, and let's add them up. And then later, if I came back, let's get rid of that last one. So that's working fine. It's adding those cells, but if I decided to delete this one, let's see if that would still work. And there we go. There's our bad cell reference. And when we actually take a look at the formula, you can see that this right here represents the cell that was deleted. So these are all problems that you can find. Let's see, what do we talk about? Misspelled functions we talked about. Values plus labels, divide by 0, square root of negative numbers. The only last one to talk about is circular reference. So if we're adding a number and including the answer in the formula, it sounds a little complicated. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say we're figuring out Bashful's grades. We're adding up test 1, 2, and 3. So that should be adding cells B5, C5, D5, and we're going to put that formula here. But what if I accidentally extended this too far and I put the formula through cell E5. Notice that E5 is the same cell that the answer is. Let's see what happens when we try that. Oh, it gives us 0. Well, obviously 76 plus 82 is not 0, but the computer has found a circular reference. Sometimes it gives you an error message, sometimes it gives you a little dot in here, but it's not something that can be easily determined. So it just kind of gives up and gives you a 0. So these are problems that you may encounter when you are doing formula that have some kind of mistakes. When you see these error messages, don't freak out. Instead, take a look at your formula, see if you can figure out what you did wrong and how you can fix that. Have a good day.